So the first announcement, again, same announcement, I'm sorry. We are reading The Attempt at Self-Criticism. I will read passages today from it to deepen and make some of the points that we're going to talk about today, and part 2 of the outline we're going to finish today. So please be into The Attempt at Self-Criticism. Also, please be reading the Antigone, because once we get into the birth of tragedy and we're talking about some of the themes and the dynamics that we're introducing now, but that Nietzsche mobilizes in the book, we will have an opportunity to look at the Antigone and say, look, this is here in the play, in the actual play, in this crisis between Antigone or Creon, or in between Antigone and Ismene, here are the examples in this tragedy of the things that Nietzsche's talking about on a broader view when he talks about the heroic perspective and the tragic perspective. So get into the Antigone, please, and then be definitely into The Attempt at Self-Criticism, okay? And we are going to finish Roman numeral 2, or actually no, Roman numeral 2 on the outline. Nietzsche's interpretation of Greek tragedy and Nietzsche's critique of Platonic and Christian metaphysics. We're going to finish that today and then read some passages, connect these ideas to some passages in The Birth of Tragedy. Okay? And then on Thursday, and if we do stop short, it is because I want to hold those ideas in one kind of moment. And then on Thursday, I want to introduce the third point, which is how Nietzsche's critique of Platonic and Christian metaphysics brings us to what we now call postmodernism or post-metaphysical philosophy, and how we're going to define that and use that. But I want that to be its own structured lecture, okay? So let's continue and finish our introduction, our kind of unpacking of Nietzsche's critique of Platonic and Christian metaphysics. And there are 2 parts of this critique. We will introduce the second part today at the end of this lecture, and then this will become a major part of Tuesday's lecture. What is postmodernism? But there are 2 parts of Nietzsche's critique of Platonic and Christian metaphysics. The first kind of part is, and we started this on Tuesday, is just understanding what metaphysics is. What is it? What is philosophical metaphysics? What is theological metaphysics? In a more nuanced way, what is Enlightenment, normative, social, medical, and behavioral sciences understood as a metaphysics? What is it? What ideas constitute a metaphysical system of thought? What is it that Nietzsche's criticizing? If we think of Platonic philosophy and Platonic philosophy as a metaphysical philosophy, what is it? What is Plato saying about truth, about reason, about the purpose of life, about what we do with knowledge and how we live? What is it that Plato's actually saying, right? That's the first part. We got to understand that, because that is essential to the course. It's essential to Nietzsche. It's essential to Foucault. It's essential to postmodernism and post-metaphysical philosophy and political philosophy in general. So we got to nail that down. And then the second part that we're going to prepare, but I want to announce it because we're going to see it in the passages we read from The Attempt at Self-Criticism, is it's not just what Nietzsche is criticizing, the actual ideas of metaphysics, but more importantly, I would say, actually, it is the consequences. Well, ultimately, what Nietzsche and Foucault will critique, call into question, deconstruct, raise our awareness of, is not just the kind of details about what metaphysical philosophy is, right? But equally as important, we'll say a little about this today, and then on Tuesday, this becomes really where we're going. And by the way, this is where we go for the rest of the course. It's not just what metaphysics is, but more importantly, what are the consequences? What are the consequences to our minds, our bodies, and our politics that result from our belief in and commitment to some form of metaphysical theory, whether it's Platonic philosophy, Christian theology, New Testament Christian theology, or Islam, or even in this really wild way. This is what made Foucault famous, us, and how we view the entire apparatus of the Enlightenment, normative, social sciences, political sciences, the behavioral sciences, psychiatries, and the pharmaceuticals, right, and the medical sciences and the natural sciences. What are the consequences to our minds, our bodies, and our politics that derive or result from our belief in and commitment to a metaphysics? And that's the really deep energy, a deep power of Nietzsche's critique of metaphysics, and as we will see in Foucault's Discipline and Punish, Foucault's critique of us. We have become the army of technicians, Foucault calls us, right? And it's not a compliment. Okay, so we got to finish this today because this is really important, and it sets up everything. And my promise that I made to you, and it's a promise I'm going to keep, and this is why I'm spending time on this outline, this first 2.5, 3 weeks on this outline, because if we understand the architecture, what is Nietzsche's understanding of Greek tragedy? And we talked about that. How does Nietzsche's understanding and interpretation bring him to a critique of Platonic and Christian metaphysics? We're doing that right now. How does that critique of Platonic Christian metaphysics lead to the Nietzsche that we know and love, the Nietzsche that introduces what we call postmodernism? And by the way, what is postmodernism? That's on Tuesday. And then, well, how do postmodernists actually critique metaphysics? How do they do it? What theoretical tool or device do they deploy to pull at the strings of the metaphysical sweater, to deconstruct the metaphysical assumptions? How do they do it? That's called nominalism, right? And so I'm making a promise. I'm going to keep a promise. And I just want you to trust me. I know you don't have any reason to, but I want you to trust me. If we walk through this architecture, if we get a kind of functional grasp of what each of these moments mean and how they relate together, when we open this book that changes the world, we're going to own it. You're going to own it. Okay? All right. On Tuesday, we began this discussion of how Nietzsche's interpretation and the beginning of the use of an interpretation of Greek tragedy led to a critique of Platonic and Christian metaphysics. And we got quite deep into this, right? And so, okay, what is metaphysics? And I don't want to bore you again with that, but we got pretty deep into this first part. We can talk about really metaphysics in 4 big claims with lots of little nuances, but we got through the first and almost the second part. But that first part is Plato and Socrates are monumental from a certain point of view because they are the first to argue that truth exists, what we call objective truth, what scientists call fact, what will be in one way or another called metaphysics. Right? And Socrates and Plato are the first to argue that some truth exists. And they said that we can think about this truth across 3 categories. We can think about the truth in sense of the first category in the sense of essential concepts. So there's a truth, there's an objective truth, literally almost a definition, an objective truth, an objective definition of something like justice or power or friendship or love. And especially the essential concepts that Plato argues are already in our mind, the contents in our mind by nature. Okay, that we have content like nature. I'm probably going to make a total tool out of myself, but I'll try to be current. According to Plato, nature downloaded the truth into our consciousness. Nature downloaded the truth about justice, about friendship, about love, downloaded the data about that, all that shit, just downloaded it into our reason. Nature did that, according to Plato. You could even think of, if you're committed to some kind of metaphysical religion, you could even think of the soul like that, right? God made humans in his or her image, whatever God is. God made humans in his or her image, and God gave us a what? A soul. And God downloaded moral truth and God's law, right? Downloaded that truth into our what? To our soul, right? And all that data is in there. We just got to figure it out. We got to become aware of it. We got to figure it out. All right. So Plato and Socrates and the emergence of New Testament Christianity, they alter world history because they're the first to argue that some truth exists about concepts, and this is where we were riffing a little bit when we ended on Tuesday. Not just truth, but there's a truth to human nature. There are objectively true accounts of what correct modes of life, what correct caring and abiding one's life looks like. Right? There's human nature. There are things that humans think and things that humans do that are true, and there are true accounts of masculinity. There are true accounts of femininity. There are true accounts of the human, and those accounts differentiate the human from the animal. There's something called an objectively true account of human nature. Now, of course, right? The different metaphysical systems of thought, philosophy, religion, and science, they're going to tell that story about the truth of human nature differently. Plato's story about it is much different than the Christian story, right? And the bioneurological mechanical story that the Enlightenment scientists tell is fundamentally different than the Christian story. So the narrative about what exactly human nature is, and true human nature is different. Each of the three major systems of thought make a really profound argument, right? That there is some truth to human nature, right? And then, of course, the third one, less important, truth about the natural world. Now, the second core idea about metaphysics, and this is where we left off on Tuesday, and we were already playing with it a little bit, is each of the metaphysical systems of thought argue, they have to argue, that there is something unique and special about being human, and therefore about our true human nature. There has to be something unique and special about being human, and therefore their account of human nature that makes us aware that we are aware, and if activated, provides us access to that objective truth. This is critical. Right, and this is where we got off a little bit on Tuesday. We were ending here, right? And even this is related to my kind of stupid analogy earlier, right? So for Plato, right, and for Kant too. Kant would say this. Hegel had a version of this. Kant has a very powerful version of this. Descartes, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. There's something about thinking, there's something about reasoning that takes me to higher understandings of who the fuck I am, right? Who we are as humans. So this is a deep tradition in philosophy. There's something, and Plato gets this going. Plato's the first to say there's something special and unique about human beings that makes them aware that they're human beings, and if they activate it, takes them to this truth. And by the way, lets them know that they've got true content already where? In their minds, right? And what did Plato call that? You guys know it's so simple. I make all this drama over very simple points. I apologize, right? What did Plato call it?
Reason.
Reason. Love you, Christina. Reason. Right? The whole origin of this idea in Western civilization that human beings are rational creatures, and that in some and again, some of these definitions I know admittedly are kind of superficial, but we got to have something simple to work with so we can get more complex. But according to Plato, reason is a special faculty. And again, even the language we use is kind of playful, right? Because we in a weird way, we still don't know what the hell reason is, right? We say, and we have no shame, right? I should quit my job when I say such kind of funny things. What is reason? Well, it's a special faculty, an ability. We don't even know. We have these kind of general loose words, right? Reason is a special ability, special faculty of mind, unique to human beings, that if used correctly, through philosophy, according to Plato and Descartes, Hegel, Kant, if used properly, connects us to that truth, to the truth of justice, to the truth of friendship, to a deeper awareness of our own nature. And the movement is so magical in a weird way because it's circular. It's not just taking us to the truth, but it's also helping us identify what's already where.
There, in
it's
our
already
minds.
there. Yeah, that's right. Right? Because if metaphysics is correct and the truth exists, right? Say as an idea or as God, and for it to be true in metaphysical systems means it has to have always what?
In there.
Yeah, I love you, Samantha. It must have always been there. It must have applied where?
To everyone.
Not first where, everywhere.
All the time.
And everywhere and all the time, and must have applied to who?
Everyone.
Everyone, right? So the fact that I show up, I haven't, Nick Dungy hasn't existed everywhere all the time, right? Nick Dungy was born in 1966 and got a couple more years to live, right? But if Plato is right, Nick Dungy showed up in 1966 and he's going to be dead in a few years, right? Good 55 years, 60 years. All right. Well, if Plato's right, Nick Dungy's got reason. And if he activates his reason's going to connect him, one, to this power of this thing called justice, or this thing called nature, his own nature. That has, because it's objectively true, because it has always existed everywhere and applied to everybody, presupposes him. This is what the philosophers mean by the a priori. Right? This is what Kant meant by the a priori. This is what Plato meant by the a priori. What must be assumed? What are the conditions of possibility? What things must be there a priori before me? A priori in Latin means from the before. Before who? Before me. What existed before me? Well, the truth. Truth of what? Fucking justice. Why? Because it's always, whatever justice is, it's always been just. Whatever it is, it applies everywhere, all around the world. And whatever it is, applies to everybody. Oh, all right, I got it. I'm in contact with that. I'm not only in contact with the truth that's out there, but now I'm getting into contact with the truth that's already where?
In your mind.
Right? Right? Plato's justice is in a weird way inside me. I got to, and by the way, through philosophy and through talking and through thinking and through struggle, the idea is we kind of figure it out slowly. Not perfectly, as Plato said and Socrates said and Strauss said, philosophy is more about the pursuit of truth than its acquisition. No one ever, no one's floating under the banyan tree, man. The fucking Buddha's around. It's about the quest, but okay, but it's there. Right, and that's a huge thing. The implications of that idea are profound, and this is, and I'm boring you with this because this is what Nietzsche and Foucault are ultimately going to be really concerned about. Right, that we're rational creatures, or we have souls, which means that the truth, not only that we have access to it, and we must go on this journey, but and that journey is an outward journey, right, as we move through life, but it's also an inward journey. The journey of nosce te ipsum, know thyself. The journey of coming to know thyself, the nosce te ipsum, know the truth of oneself, and knowing oneself entails not just knowing true, what the fuck is justice? How am I a friend? because I don't want to be Crito. I want to be a better friend. Okay. But it's all, it's an internal journey as well. And so there's truth out there. There's the truth in us, right? And the second point, there's something unique about human beings that gives them access to that truth. And in a weird way, the truth is already in us. Okay. Now, this means, and this is where we drifted off on Tuesday as class ended, this means that not only is there truth out there, but in metaphysical theories, this also means that there is a true self. There's a true self. There's an objectively true self. There's a set of characteristics or attributes that are uniquely and objectively Nick Dungy, and that are uniquely and objectively Brian, that are uniquely and objectively Christina and Leslie and Saud, Ruan, right? And so at the core of metaphysics, there's not just this idea that there's something unique about each of us, reason, that allows us access to the truth, but it gives rise to the deeper idea that there's an objectively true self, right? And this idea, again, just to repeat at the risk of irritating you, the different metaphysical stories interpret that differently. Plato's conception of the objectively true self is radically different in some ways than the Christian notion of an objectively true self. And the modern Enlightenment normative social and behavioral science account of the objectively true self, right, grounded in bioneural and cellular differences and DNA differences. That story is fucking totally different than Plato and the Christian story. But each one of those narratives, right, each one of those metaphysical theories has an account of an objectively true self. Right? So if in some way, if you're committed to Platonic metaphysics, you're committed to the idea that there's an objectively true self. In fact, Plato writes in the Republic. Nature has written into each one of our souls a specific talent and ability. Literally, I'm literally paraphrasing chapter 2 of the Republic. I can probably even quote it, the whole fucking passage. Don't waste your life like I have. Plato says, nature has given to us, ascribed to each of us, a unique set of aptitudes and talents. Socrates says in the Republic, when he's talking to Glaucon and Thrasymachus and Polemachus, he says, haven't you noticed, because they're on their way to building the just city, and Socrates says, haven't you noticed how people are different at doing good things? Like some people are really good at making shoes. Some people are really good at being accountants. And some people are really good at playing baseball. And boy, have you had that person's cookies? Fuck, can he or she bake? People are naturally good at certain things. And they're naturally good at certain things, Plato argues, metaphysical philosophy argues, because nature has written into our souls, ascribed to us, to our natures, a specific set of aptitudes and talents. And you hear this all the time in a colloquial way. Oh, she was born to do that. Oh, he was born to do that. Nick Dungy was born to be a professor, right? You hear this all the time, right? And what that means, and this is what Plato meant, there's a true self. There's a deep truth to Nick Dungy. And now we're going to get pretty heavy here. And this is going to play out for the rest of the class. There's not just an objective truth about Nick Dungy's talents, but there's an objective truth about how Nick Dungy should figure out those talents, develop them, and live with them, and sort of provide them. And by the way, this is what Plato means by being individually just. Literally, it's in the Republic. that you figure out what your natural talents, you're natural. Or the Christians will say, you're God-given. or the Enlightenment psychiatrists will say, well, this is just your fucking DNA. Right? And in various ways, the suggestion is figure out who you are, figure out the truth of your talents or your aptitudes, and do it. Right? And Plato is very strict about this. And by the way, if you ever wanted to know what injustice on the personal level means for Plato, I'll tell you. Injustice for Plato, I'll give you my example. Say Plato is right. Nick Dungy's talent was to be a professor. Because he's so fucking brilliant and he speaks so well. Good joke. Right? But that's his talent. His talent was to teach. His purpose, his truth, and his purpose was not to play baseball. When I was young, I wanted to play baseball. I didn't want to be a professor. I wanted to play baseball. That was my passion. That was my love. I wanted to play baseball. I wanted to play professional baseball. And Plato would say, had I followed my passion and tried to play baseball, one, I would have sucked. And that's true, because I'm blind, physically unfit for any sort of professional sports. All right. So I would have ended up AAA Lake Elsinore, batting 111. Right? And I would have spent my whole life trying to be a professional baseball player. And according to Plato, literally, technically on Plato's account, I would have been unjust. I would have been unjust to myself, and I would have been unjust to everybody else, because I didn't understand who I was supposed to be. I was supposed to be an accountant, or I was supposed to be a professor. I was supposed to be a medical doctor. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand who I am and what I was supposed to do. I didn't understand my truth. And in not understanding my truth and living it, I am unjust to myself. My soul's out of order, and I'm unjust to the rest of you. So on the second level of metaphysics, it's not just that there's something unique about us that provides us awareness and access to that truth, or helps us understand what's already been put inside us by God or by nature in terms of the ideas. But there's also an objectively true self. And the goal in life is to identify what that is and cultivate it and share it. And that is absolutely true for Platonic metaphysics, for Christian theology, and Enlightenment normative social behavioral sciences. And you guys say this, we say it all the time culturally, even from the point of view of a kind of Enlightenment science. We say, the people who are in the biology department, all right, they come and take 350, and they say to me, oh man, I'm just not good at philosophy. I suck at philosophy. It's boring to me. It doesn't interest me. And even if I was interested, I'm a biologist or I'm a chemist. I don't understand justice. Talk to me about cellular division and talk to me about that. I get biochemistry. But this fucking justice shit, I can't get it. I was not born to be a philosopher. It's not my thing. It's not in my nature. We even say that. It's not in my DNA. So this is very deep. Metaphysics is very, very, very deep. Even at the most kind of innocent sounding colloquial phrases we have. That's metaphysics. But what it means is there's a truth to you. And the purpose is not only to figure out the truth as concepts or as God, but to figure out the truth as an objectively true self. 3rd point. All metaphysical arguments in one way or another say this. Not only does objective truth exist, concepts, human nature, natural processes, not only is there something unique and special about human beings that makes them aware of themselves and provides access to that truth, and also that inward journey about Nuske Tiepsem, the truth of the self, is a true self. But 3, here we go. Now we're going to get deeper. I mean, all of these things are issues that Nietzsche and Foucault are obsessed with, but now it's going to get kind of funky. 3rd point of metaphysics. It's 4, this is 3. to be sure, they think of it as being done in different ways, but all three metaphysical systems of thought say the same thing. The purpose of life. Socrates said this. Jesus says this. The psychiatrists say this. You're doing it right now in the university. What this is, you've just spent 4 years in the quintessential example of the Enlightenment normative social fucking science. You're getting a degree in political science. You're in a college called the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, right? All three of them say, in one way or another, the purpose of life, the purpose of life. Not one of the many purposes of life, the purpose of life is to spend your entire life to the best of your ability and circumstances doing what? Acquiring what?
Knowledge.
Truth.
I love you guys. Knowledge. That's right. That's right. Socrates, Jesus, and the MIT PhD/MD psychiatrists. They all say the same thing. Professor Denji says the same thing to you all the time in class. The purpose of your life is to spend your life acquiring knowledge. Knowledge about what? If you're obsessed with Enlightenment, normative, social and behavioral sciences, political science. You guys have spent 4 years acquiring political science knowledge that you think, political science information, that you think in some way is valuable and in some way represents an accurate description of the way fucking things work. And you think it's true, you think it's good for you. And then you're going to go out and you're going to be social workers and you're going to be policy analysts and you're going to be lawyers, right? You're going to become an army of technicians, right? You will spend your life, a significant part of it, to the best of your abilities and conditions, acquiring this knowledge. And that's the purpose of life. Socrates said the same thing. Socrates walked around for 30 years, and that's what he said. Purpose of your life isn't. Now, part of our problem is a little more complicated because it's in the late modern post-capitalist world. That old idea, even if it's in its contemporary Enlightenment case, spend your life acquiring knowledge, now competes with other things like acquire pleasure, acquire fame, acquire likes on Instagram, acquire stuff, right? So our case is a little more complicated, but it's still deeply embedded in it. Socrates said the purpose of your life is to acquire knowledge. Knowledge of what? Justice, knowledge of who you are, your nature. Jesus said the purpose of your life is to acquire knowledge. Knowledge of what? What is written, what's been revealed in the book. The scientists say the purpose of your life is to acquire knowledge. Knowledge about what? In our case, political phenomena. Why? So you can make the place better. Okay. That's the purpose of life. Now again, at the risk of being dramatic, I want to emphasize the. There's one fucking purpose in life. Figure it out. Now, the opposite is also true. If you somehow don't figure it out, if you somehow don't do it, if you don't somehow pursue that, then in a weird way, you are out of what? You are out of what?
Align with the cosmos?
Yeah, I love you. That's fuck yeah. You can just teach the class, Samantha. You're on fire today. She brought it in 411 earlier. She's just on a tear.
Thank you.
You're out of a line with the cosmos. You're out of a line with what you're supposed to be doing in life. You're out of a line with your own nature. You're out of a line with the purpose, right? And this is so heavy, man. This is so heavy. You're out of line. There's a purpose. Life has a purpose. And by the way, is this a purpose that you choose?
No.
Mm-mm.
Born with it.
Now, you can choose to be in alignment with it or out of alignment, but you don't get to choose in the big fucking cosmic sense whether life has a purpose or not. That has already been what?
Determined.
It's already been determined. That's right. Your choice, free will. God gave you free will. People can be ignorant, Plato says. Psychiatrists say people can act on different impulses. Right? The choice is to be in alignment or not alignment. The choice isn't about choosing purposes. There's a purpose. There is a purpose. Acquire knowledge to the best of one's conditions and abilities about the truth. Depending on how, what, if you're a Platonic philosopher, that's going to look one way. If you're a New Testament Christian, it's going to look another way. If you're a political scientist, it's going to look another way. There's a purpose. There's an objective truth out there, concepts, nature, human nature, natural world, something unique about human beings called reason or the soul that makes them aware, gives them access to that. And it's not just access out there, but it's an awareness of the data, of the truth that's already in it. Therefore, there's an objective truth to each person. Your purpose in life is to figure who out you are, figure out what your nature is, what your talents are, cultivate it. And then 4, this is the big one. They're all related, but now it kind of comes together. And the purpose of acquiring all this knowledge is to do what?
Share it.
What's that?
Share it.
Well, first to apply it to who?
Oh, yourself.
Yourself, right? Because what good is the knowledge if you don't apply it? Right? You read all this philosophy and you're still an idiot. You read all these divine books and you're still immoral. Right? You know what you need to do to keep your mind and body healthy, but you still keep fucking eating Doritos and drinking Coke. So it's not enough to acquire knowledge. You got to do what?
Apply it.
You got to apply it. And you got to apply it first to who?
Yourself.
And then, Christina, as you said, correctly apply it to who?
To others, the city.
To the city, in search of justice. Big justice, Jay. Okay. So, and the purpose of that, is is to live how? Well. And in the various metaphysical systems of thought, when we say well, what also do we mean?
Morally.
Yeah, morally. Live morally. As Socrates would say, virtuously. Right? As Socrates famously said in the Crito. He said, look, Crito, the purpose of life isn't just to live. The purpose of life isn't just to do a bunch of fucking heroin and live as long as you can. The purpose of life is to live how, Socrates said? Well. And by well, he meant morally, virtuously. Same thing in Christianity. The purpose of life is literally to live how? Literally, morally. Life is a moral project. The purpose of acquiring knowledge about the truth, which is moral, the truth of the self and the truth outside, and applying that to yourself and to applying it to the city is to live morally. Life is a moral project. It's only a moral project. And if you are not in line with the moral project, both individually, both politically, both socially, both sexually, both in your nature, if you're not in line with the moral project, you are misunderstanding who the fuck you are. You are misunderstanding what you're supposed to be doing. You're misunderstanding your place in the society. And in misunderstanding all of those things, you are subject to coercion. You're subject to restraint, to correction, to coercion. And even now, we don't as the heirs of some type of enlightenment, normative, social and behavioral medical sciences, we don't use the word morality, but what's the buzzword now?
Healthy?
Yeah, are you healthy? Are you healthy? Are you healthy? Are you mentally healthy? Are you sexually healthy? Are you physically healthy? Right? Are you healthy? And what the fuck does that mean? Well, you're acquiring knowledge about how to stop anxiety or to stop depression, or are you eating the right foods and exercising? So you have the optimum healthy body functions. Are you in normal, healthy sexual relations?
I think it's interesting because Plato also uses the word healthy when he's talking about the healthy city and then the unhealthy sick city.
There's a direct line between them.
And I think it's also kind of funny how, I just see it happening that Nietzsche is going to say that what Plato shuts down and what Plato calls the sick city and what he calls the healthy city is essentially what's causing us to be sick, right? Because living our lives metaphysically for Plato was the healthy city.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's causing the slave morality, and that's what's causing us to be nihilistic.
According to Nietzsche.
It's just funny how there's that flip.
Yep. Well, but again, that's
the point.
That's the point, right? Nietzsche's going to argue, and let me loop back to a way I phrased it earlier, just to finish this point that Christina's making. What really sets postmodernism in motion, and we'll talk more deeply about this for sure on Tuesday when we get to point 3, Roman numeral 3 on the outline. What really animates postmodernism is less. It's still important, but it's less important in the big scheme of things, which is, by the way, this is going to sound counterintuitive when I tell you this. We'll talk about it later why this is. There's a reason why this is. But what sets Nietzsche in motion? What sets Foucault in motion? What sets postmodernism in motion? Really, at the end of the day, is not so much the obsession with the question, does truth exist or not? That's not what really animates postmodernism. Because as we will see, and I don't want to get into it now, so this sounds counterintuitive, but I just beg you to trust me. Because technically speaking, from a postmodern point of view, from a nominalist point of view, given how they interpret language, right? In a weird way, we're not in a position, and we never can be, if the postmodern account of language is accurate, nobody, Plato or Nick Dungy, Jesus, nobody is in a position to be able to state one way or another whether what exists.
The truth.
The truth. And again, we're not there yet, so this sounds counterintuitive, but it's caught up in the postmodern interpretation of what language is and how it works. We'll get there. But so at the end of the day, it's funny because Nietzsche's famous for being critical of the truth. Foucault is famous for being critical of the truth. right? But at the end of the day, as suspicious as they are about it, in a weird way, from their own theoretical perspectives, they're in no better position than anybody else to be able to say no human being is. If the postmodern account of language is anomalous account of language is accurate, and we're going to tell that story, then no one is in a position to really get outside of the language to know, to be able to say from a point of view outside of language, from a point of view outside of the type of valuation that's opened up in language, outside of the way that operates as power, no one's able to say, oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah, not possible. So at the end of the day, the postmoderns are less obsessed with that. But as I said earlier, the one question they're really obsessed, and this gets to Christina's question, right? This is the energy of Nietzsche's critique of Platonic and Christian metaphysics and Foucault's critique of the Enlightenment. It's not so much the big question of whether the truth or DNA or justice exists. It is rather, what are the consequences? What are the effects to our minds, our bodies, and our politics that result from our belief in a metaphysical truth and our commitment to it? What are the effects? And that's what Christina was getting at. It is, from Nietzsche's point of view and Foucault's point of view, it is precisely our belief in and commitment to some form of metaphysics that tells us that there's truth out there, that there's one truth, that you're rational, or you have a soul, or you got a certain set of DNA arrangements that let you aware of it, that your fucking purpose is to acquire as much knowledge as you can about that for as long as you can, given your conditions. That's the purpose. And you do that, you acquire all that moral knowledge, that knowledge about how to live, how to be healthy, how to know God. And you acquire that knowledge so you can apply it to yourself, so you can live well. So you can be self-governing, Socrates said. And you apply it to the city so the city can pursue justice. Okay. And for Nietzsche and Foucault, it is precisely the moralization of life, the obsession with turning minds and bodies and politics into kind of moral projects, rigid, defined moral projects. That's the crisis. And as Christina beautifully said, that from Nietzsche and Foucault's point of view, that is precisely what's causing the nihilism. That's what's precisely causing the self-hatred, the deep self. I'm still waiting for the call from 11 people. I'm still waiting for the call. All right. Now, we'll read a few passages and we'll call it a night. Let's drive home this whole issue. So we have identified what it is about metaphysics and how, from a Nietzschean and later Foucaultian point of view, our belief in and our commitment to metaphysics for Nietzsche creates crisis. Literally does the opposite of what it promises to do. Now let's talk about how Nietzsche talks about that in the attempt at self-criticism. You ready? Okay. First, I'm gonna rearrange the page numbers in the attempt at self-criticism to go thematically. So let's talk about how this operates in Socrates and Plato. We'll talk about how this operates in Christianity, and we'll talk about how this operates in science. Okay, you ready? Okay. Page 4, attempt at self-criticism. And by the way, does anyone have their copy of the attempt at self-criticism?
Yes.
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 So do me a favor. I apologize I should know this. What page number in your version, because sometimes these people, they put introductions at the beginning, they put them at the end, and that messes the page number. So what page number does the attempt at self-criticism begin on in your edition?
Page
3.
3.
Page
3.
3.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank God. Okay, so on page 4, middle of the page, okay, of the attempt at self-criticism, Nietzsche has just gone through why he valorizes the tragic perspective. Remember we read those passages last week? Right? Why is it that these Greek tragedians needed tragedy? What did it do? Remember those? Remember that? Okay. Now on page 4, he switches and he's going to talk about the death of tragedy. All right? So page 4. First talking about Socrates and Plato, the emergence of Socrates and Plato. And on the other hand, top third of page 4, Nietzsche writes, he's switching. He's just talked about why these tragic Greeks were heroic and powerful, emotionally fierce, poetically creative, right? And then he turns and he says, and on the other hand, he says, that which brought about the death of tragedy. What brings about the death of tragedy? The emergence of who?
Socrates.
Socrates, and the emergence of Plato, and the emergence of metaphysical philosophy. And on the other hand, that which brought about the death of tragedy. The Socratism of morality, Socratic morality. Let me fix his grammar there. Socratic morality, right? The emergence of metaphysics. What an objective truth what? Exists. That truth is out there and it's also where? In your head. There's an objectively true who?
Self.
Self. There's objectively true knowledge as moral knowledge. The purpose of life is to spend your life acquiring that moral knowledge. The purpose of it is to apply it to yourself and apply it to everybody. That's what he's talking about here. And that which brought about the death of tragedy, Socratic morality, the Platonic dialectics, modesty and cheerfulness of theoretical man, philosophy. Philosophy brings a humility. I know Socratic wisdom. My wisdom is found in the fact that I know that I don't what? Know. Socratic modesty, cheerfulness, but there's truth out there. We're going to figure it out. Your modesty at being a political science major, you're going to acquire all this knowledge, and you're going to go out and you're going to fix families, and you're going to fix inequality, and you're going to fix public policy. The cheerfulness, the optimism of theoretical, philosophical human beings who know the truth exists. And on the other hand, that which brought the death of tragedy, Socratic morality, Platonic dialectics, modesty and cheerfulness of the philosophical man and women. And now here we go. Could not that very Socratic morality, could not metaphysics itself, this is key, could not the very emergence of Socratic and Platonic philosophy as morality, could not that be a symptom of decline, fatigue, infection, and the dissolution of the instincts? Again, Nietzsche is going to argue that the emergence of Socrates and Plato, of moral philosophy and metaphysics, does not represent the beginning of that which is noble and empowering and enlightening in human being. It is rather a sort of it illuminates fatigue. It illuminates a weariness. It illuminates an exhaustion. It illuminates a fatigue. A fatigue about what? How life is and how the Greeks of the tragic age lived and what they knew and how it allowed them to be emotionally fierce, intellectually creative, and produce works of art like the Antigone. Metaphysics is a symptom of fatigue. Morality is a symptom of exhaustion, with the existential need and responsibility to give a world that doesn't have it meaning, to give your life that doesn't have it meaning and value, and to find the emotional strength to assert that meaning and that value, and to undergo a series of adventures in life where you are in agon about that, because if you're not doing it, someone's going to do it to you. Someone will define you. Someone will assign a value. Someone will locate you in a socioeconomic and political hierarchy. And that which brought about the death of tragedy, Socratic morality, Platonic dialectics, modesty and cheerfulness of the theoretical man and woman, could not that very Socratic morality, that philosophical optimism, could that not be actually a symptom of decline, fatigue, exhaustion, infection of the heroic spirit? And might the Greek cheerfulness, by which he meant the optimism of philosophy, and might the Greek cheerfulness of the later Greeks be nothing but the glow of a sunset? We are the last rays of that glow of sunset. Nietzsche calls us, you and I, living right now, watching the fucking Kardashians and thinking they're amazing. We are the last flickering rays of that sunset. And the cheerfulness of the later Greeks be nothing but the glow of sunset. The Epicurean will against reality, merely a precaution of the afflicted. Now to Christianity. What are the consequences from Christianity? Page 8. Perhaps the depth of this counter-moral tendency, postmodern, his critique of metaphysics, that's what he's talking about. Perhaps the depth of this counter-moral tendency, and again, when he says counter-moral tendency of what? Our willingness to think that there's a truth inside where?
Our minds.
Our minds. About what? Who we are and how we're supposed to live and the purpose of life and applying that so we're moral people. Perhaps the depth, I'm right in the middle of page 8. Perhaps the depth, he says profundity, but depth's better. Perhaps the depths of this counter-moral tendency is best gauged by the discreet and hostile silence with which Christianity is treated throughout the whole book. Christianity as the most Christianity as the most extravagant elaboration of the moral theme that humanity has ever heard. Truly, Nietzsche writes, nothing could be more opposed to the purely aesthetic, tragic, what we have been calling the tragic, heroic perspective, Nietzsche calls aesthetic. I'll explain that in a little bit. Truly, nothing could be more opposed to the purely aesthetic interpretation and justification of the world as taught in the book than Christian doctrine, which, speaking to Christian doctrine, is only moral and seeks only to be moral with its absolute standards. The truth of God, for example, which relegates art, all art, to the realm of falsehood. Christianity denies, condemns, and damns it. In this system of ideas and values, Christian metaphysical system of ideas and values, which must be hostile to art if it is to be in any way consistent with its principles. I have always sensed hostility to life, the nihilism. I have always sensed hostility to life a furious, vindictive distaste or hatred for life itself in Christianity. For all life is based on appearance, art, deception, point of view, the necessity of perspective and error. From the start, Christianity was essentially and fundamentally the embodiment of disgust and hatred for life, merely disguised, concealed, got up in the belief in a better world and other world. Hatred of the world, the condemnation of the emotions, the fear of beauty and sensuality, a transcendental world, the world of God, the metaphysical world, a transcendental world invented, the better to slander this one. Basically, Christianity is a yearning for non-existence. And then science, back to page 4. And science itself, he writes, our own science, political science, you and I, our political science, my fucking degree, my value, my truth, what I was supposed to be, what I was born to do, political science professor. And science itself, our own science. What does all of science mean as a symptom of life? Might the scientific approach be nothing but fear, a flight from reality, a subtle form of self-defense against the truth? And he doesn't mean metaphysical truth, he means the truth, fact that the world in and of itself has no inherent meaning or order. And morally speaking, science, and morally speaking, is science something like cowardice and falsehood? All right. On Tuesday, we will see how this moment then begins what we will come to call postmodernism in Nietzsche and Foucault. Have a fabulous weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Love you guys very much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Professor.
you.
A good one.
Professor.
Yep. Have a great weekend, you guys. Miss you guys very much. I miss seeing all of you.
Us too. Thank you, Professor. Bye.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everybody.